Once a proud nation of hunters and warriors, but now the poorest of the Southwestern's, the Navajo people live in a barren and 1,000 square miles. Most of the land is in Arizona and New Mexico. They are still a nomadic people, frequently moving from place to place on the vast reservation. Wherever their small herd of sheep and goats will find grazing land and be fairly near one of the scarce holes or springs. Their herds are the Navajo's livelihood. They drink the goat milk, and sheep and goats provide all their meat. Their women make rugs and blankets from the wool. Wherever the Navajo decides to settle down for a period of time, he plants a little corn and builds a hogan of heavy pine logs with mud sealing the cracks. The women folk set up their looms near the hogan and work on their rugs and blankets between other chores. The trading post is the Navajo's only link with the outside world. The trader, his best friend. Whether he wants to buy staple foods or sell his surplus sheep or get help for a sick member of his family, the trader will take care of his needs. The Navajos often use their silver belts and other jewelry instead of money if they run out of cash. This has been an accepted custom for many years. The trader simply writes out a ticket for the valuables received, and he will, in turn, give the Indians groceries, clothing, or anything else they desire. He puts the silver into an old safe called the pawn. Every Navajo trader has one. No matter how long the Navajo's jewelry stays in the pawn, there will be no interest charged against him, and it will never be sold. Sam Begay, a fine silversmith whose father is a medicine man, comes to the trader to buy scrap silver, which he will cast into conchos and bracelets. Scrap silver is cheaper and just as good for his needs. He buys it by the ounce, and he will be paid the same way when he delivers the finished product. Sam knows of not far from his hogan where there is some white sandstone, soft enough to be cut and used to make a mold. After he has found a stone about the right size, he looks it over for possible cracks. The stone is good, and he returns to his lonely hogan 6 miles away from the trading post to start his work. With a saw, he first cuts one side of the stone down to a flat surface. The design is then drawn on the surface with a pencil, and it is hollowed out with a sharp knife. A slab is sawed off the stone and cut into a rectangle. The straight lines of the design are carefully drawn with a ruler on the mold. A layer of soot covering the design makes it easier to put finishing touches. Tallow is burned against the inside of the mold. This new layer of soot will prevent the silver from sticking to the stone. A second slab of sandstone, wrapped together with the cotton, completes the mold. The silver, which Sam has placed in a thin, hollowed-out, is melted over a fire, with a blowtorch adding heat from above. It is now ready for pouring. The melting pot is removed from the fire, but the blowtorch is held close to the molten silver to keep it liquid as it is poured into the mold. The mold is unwrapped and opened. Sam lays aside the cast, which is still very hot. After it is cooled off, the neck of the cast, which is the part that filled the pouring hold, is cut with heavy tin snips. The mold marks are carefully filed off all the edges. The cast is sanded and polished, and another piece is ready for the trader. The Navajos, famed as makers of fine rugs, are still using the same kind of primitive vertical loom they used several hundred years ago. Because they move about so much, their looms are highly portable and can be set up in a few minutes anywhere. Luke Yazzie is helping his wife Irene fasten the yarn beam to the frame. After the loom is set up, Mrs. Yazzie goes out in the desert to look for plants, which will supply her with dyes for her yarn. The Navajo women use certain plants, roots, and tree barks for their dyes. Mrs. Yazzie has dried the herbs in the summer hogan, where she lives with her husband during the warm months. And now she is about to make the dye. Some squaws powder their plants after drying, but Mrs. Yazzie prefers to boil them whole. She uses Navajo tea for yellow, juniper boughs for brown, and the roots of the juniper for red. Having placed the roots in the water, she adds a piece of lime as mordant. Its purpose is to make the dye permanent. The yarn is dipped into the solution, and color is deep enough, it is hung up to dry. Now that the loom has been set up, there are other chores to be done for Luke Yazzie. The sheep in the pasture must be looked after, and their small plot of corn must be watered, while Mrs. Yazzie works at the loom. After she has pulled the yarn through the shed, she pushes the batten up and twists it to open the shed, passes the yarn through, and then packs it down with a comb made from oak wood. The batten is taken out and the heddle pulled down. Though the fabric seems delicate with the sun shining through it, the finished rug is very sturdy. Where there are larger family groups living together, all the women take some part in the work of weaving. One woman is busy carding the wool, which has previously been washed and dried. This is done to straighten the tangled fibers. Using a couple of combing cards, she combs a handful of wool into a big fluffy roll ready for spinning. Another woman rolls and twists the wool until it is a heavy strand. She keeps twisting and pulling it as she winds it onto a spindle. The strands are re-spun until they are of the desired thickness. A third woman, with the help of her small daughter, is setting up a new warp by passing the yarn alternately over and under the thread beams, so that the yarn makes a figure 8 on each round. Grandmother is working on the loom, making a saddle blanket with a traditional diamond twill. It has taken Mrs. Yazzie many days' work to finish her rug. Now it is ready to be sold at the trading post. The Yazzies are leaving for Springs early in the morning. The trip will take them 2 hours over rocky and dusty roads. They plan to spend the rest of the day at the trading post. Luke has heard that the white trader from Window Rock, which is the capital of the Navajos, is due in Pine Springs to pick up the rugs and silver jewelry that have been finished recently. Sam, the silversmith, too, has heard of the white trader's impending arrival. He wants him to see a new pattern which he has cast in silver. If the trader likes it, he will make a sample belt connecting the single pieces, or conchos, with a strip of black leather, and if he thinks the customers will like it, he will place a large order with Sam. In his kerchief, Sam also carries bracelets which he has cast, bent, and mounted with a polished stone. The finished jewelry is piled on the silver scale again. The price for the scrap silver he bought on credit is deducted from the fixed price per ounce of the finished product. The difference is what Sam has earned. While Sam Begay's silver is being weighed, the Yazzies have arrived at the store. Mrs. Yazzie, who carried the rug, lays it on the counter, and Sammy Day, the local trader, looks it over carefully. Being half Navajo himself, he is an expert at judging Indian rugs and jewelry. Luke Yazzie has his eyes on a pair of heavy shoes which might come in handy for the winter season. He examines them carefully as Sammy Day checks the rug and determines the purchase price. Mrs. Yazzie has agreed on the price. Their pawn silver belts are returned to them, and they get some cash in addition. With it, they'll buy staple foods at the store, and perhaps a piece of velvet for a squaw dress for their little daughter. Luke might even purchase the shoes he saw, but that will take more time. The Navajo likes to think it over carefully before he makes a purchase. In the meantime, it is nice to have the money. Carrying their purchases, the Yazzies leave the trading post. Luke walks a few paces ahead of his wife, as is the custom among all Indians. A little later, on a piece of ground the medicine man donated for an airstrip, They all watched the arrival of the white trader from Window Rock, the capital. Mr. Sewell, the trader, was hired by the Navajo Tribal Council to be the manager of their Arts and Crafts Guild, which is one of their tribal enterprises. Because it is his job to find and expand markets where their products can be sold, he will closely check the quality of all work. New patterns of silver or on rugs are shown to him for approval. The work is good. Mr. Sewell knows there is a demand for well-made Indian rugs, and Navajo silver craft has become very popular, especially in the western states. He will fly to other trading posts in the reservation to pick up more finished goods. If things go well for the Navajo artisans, there will be fewer silver belts in the trader's pawn next winter. There will be a little more money and a little less hardship in the lonely hogans. So long, trader.